KC Singh, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs; Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary; Raymond Vickery is former Assistant Secretary of Commerce of the United States of America; Sadanand Dhume, Resident Fellow of the American Enterprise Institute of Washington, D.C. is joining us from Ahmedabad. My first question is to Christine Fair, who's Assistant Professor at Georgetown University. She's joining us on a Skype link from Washington. Ms. Fair, what do you make of what Chuck Hagel said there about India?
Well, actually, if you listen to the video is not nearly as outrageous as the response to the video has been. He's halting, he's hesitating. It's also completely devoid of context. The only video I've seen is that actual part where he has made the statements that have been so inflammatory. Now, look, the reality is historically, India is not as innocent as it says it is, and it's not as guilty as the Pakistanis say. Historically, India has had ties with the Baluch insurgents. I don't think that that's something that's terribly controversial, although I suspect some Indians will think it is. And ultimately, I think where Hagel went wrong was his comments where he said that India was causing problems for Pakistan in Afghanistan. That's not actually the Pakistani argument. And I think he should have also perhaps reflected on the unfortunate fact that the Americans haven't really taken this issue very seriously. So, for example, many of the India analysts in Washington, D.C. will also get up in a swivet over these comments. But the fact is, American intelligence has not really focused on this issue. So when they say we have no information, suggesting that there is nothing there, the reality is they actually haven't looked. Other countries, such as, for example, the United Kingdom, have looked at India's role in Afghanistan, and they do not come to the same conclusion that many Americans have, that the Indian role is entirely positive in Afghanistan. And I will say that even more so than the American refusal to take seriously this issue, and by the way, the reasons to do this are both to exculpate India from the most outrageous claims. So, for example, Pakistanis also claim that the Indians are behind the militants of the TTP in the tribal areas. They also claim that the Indians, as well as the Americans, are behind attacks in Pakistan itself. So it would be useful for the Americans to take seriously these claims, if for no other reason than the Americans could feel fairly confident about how they bound the problem set. No, as I said, India is not as innocent as it says, but it surely is not as guilty as the Pakistanis claim.
Let's get a second perspective. You see, there are two issues to look at here. I'd like to go to Sadanand next on this. One issue is, about the fact that he hasn't got any strong basis to his claims. Where is the evidence that India is behind attacks on Pakistan or on Pakistan indirectly on Pakistan from the Afghanistan side? The second point, which is of greater concern, is that you're going to have a US Defense Secretary, Sadanand, who probably has a fairly fixed view, towards India at a time when we were saying that America is finally beginning to de-hyphenate India and Pakistan. You have an incoming Defense Secretary who has a fairly strong bias.
Let me take both of these points. First of all, I have to say I disagree with my old friend Chris Fair. The basic point is that if there is no proof, the default really is that a country is innocent of these charges. More to the point, Chuck Hagel has really said things that fly in the face of official US policy. You have to understand these speeches came in 2011. In 2010, President Obama had come to India and praised India's Afghanistan policy in India's parliament. So this is not a mainstream view. It's certainly not a mainstream view among India watchers in Washington. Neither is it a mainstream view in the policy community in the United States. And so this, if you sort of add this on to some of his other views on other subjects, what it really gives you is a picture of this maverick character who's sort of out there with his own sort of strange views that deviate both from the views of the mainstream and deviate from the views of the administration that he's supposed to serve. And this is certainly cause for concern. It may not be cause for as much concern as if this was said by a sitting defense secretary, but it certainly is something that's cause for some concern. And I think the Indian Embassy is right in issuing that statement, and I think India is right in expecting a certain amount of clarification here.
We haven't seen any clarification here at all, and that's a point of concern. Let's get Raymond Vickery in. A person cannot have a when a person has a strong personal bias, it reflects eventually in what they do when they are in office. We know that Kissinger and Nixon had an extreme antagonism towards Indira Gandhi and India, and that reflected in the role they played in the 1971 war. And that is only one example. You know, we cannot, New Delhi cannot completely ignore what Chuck Hagel has said. There is genuine concern about it. Raymond Vickery.
Well, first of all, I think it must be clear that Chuck Hagel is a friend of India. I spent 3 years of my life working on the U.S.-India civil nuclear deal. Chuck Hagel was a member of the Foreign Relations Committee at that time. We didn't have a stronger supporter than Chuck Hagel on it. After it went through, Chuck Hagel went to Pakistan, met with Musharraf. Musharraf said he wanted the deal that India had. And Chuck Hagel told him in no uncertain terms that it just wasn't in the cards because Pakistan didn't behave like India. Now, what's really going on here is something called operations research, in which the Republicans are trying to defeat the nomination up today before the Senate, and they're pulling out all the stops. And what they do is go through and fly-spec everything anybody has said and say, aha, I got you. Now, on this particular incident, this was at an Oklahoma University in an academic setting. His overall point had to do with the fragility of the relationships between Pakistan and Afghanistan. He did say that there were financing problems, Pakistan has viewed anything that India does in Afghanistan as causing them a problem. So what he's trying to do, and what he's done throughout his career, is to step back and take a little bit broader view. Now, some Republicans can't stand that.
No, I haven't seen one single statement
on Iraq.
I haven't seen a single statement in which I have heard Chuck Hagel ever comment on the fact that it is Pakistan that is keeping terrorism alive in Afghanistan. And this has been acknowledged by everyone, including the president of Pakistan. There seems to be a clear skew in the way he's thinking about it. On the issue of context, I mean, I've seen what he has said. He has said...
That's just not right, Arnab. In fact, he has taken a broad view in terms of the relationship between India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. This is something which has come up at the last minute from a very right-wing source in the Washington press. The Washington Free Beacon, which prides itself on fighting the left wing.
I'm coming to you, Christine. No, K.C. Singh and Kamal Sibal, I'm just coming to you. I want to go back to Christine here. The statement is very clear, Christine. He says India has over the years financed problems for Pakistan. India has for some time used Afghanistan as a second front.
The issue is actually using Afghanistan as a place to harass Pakistan in Baluchistan. So as I said in my opening statement, he was wrong in terms of the location of the challenge. But in terms of the overall, if you look at the context of the talk, he was trying to explain clearly to an audience, what is the issue between India and Pakistan and Afghanistan? That was very clearly the intent. So there wasn't this malicious intent that the Indian media has seeded into this. And as has already been noted, he is not a foe of India, but he was trying to explain to a relatively jejune audience about South Asian complexity, and he himself got some of the details wrong. But the overriding concern that Pakistan has about Afghanistan being used by India to sow discord in Baluchistan is not new. And oh, by the way, it's part of the historical record.
I want
the ties between the Indians and the Baluch insurgents. This is not rocket science. It's not new. And that we're pretending that it's even not real is almost preposterous.
No, I want you to. Now I'll get in the senior diplomats from India. But Christine, before I do that, I want you to explain your comment, where you say that India is not as innocent as is being made out to be by some people. Explain what you mean by India is not as innocent on Balochistan.
You want me to explain the position, then let me do it and don't cut me off. Where India has actually been very active is in the parts of Afghanistan which are actually most inflammatory to the Pakistanis. So, for example, I've been to Kunar. I don't know if you have been. And the Indians chose to build schools right on the border of Kunar across from Bajor. Now, if you go and talk to the governor of Kunar at the time, as I did in 2008, he actually thought that this was a cute little Indian punga to tick off the Pakistanis. So clearly, it was provocative. Now, is this on the verge of supporting terrorism? No. But the problem that the Pakistanis have with India, and I think is the one place where the Pakistanis are not completely out to lunch, is on this issue of Balochistan. The historical ties between Baloch nationalist insurgents in India and Afghanistan are clear. So where Hagel I want to take this back from Hagel. If you listen to the video, it's not as outrageous. He clearly is wrong on the facts. He's not trying to malign India. He's trying to explain why it is that India has equities in Afghanistan and why does Pakistan care about India in Afghanistan. Now, to an American audience, that's an important puzzle. He gets the facts wrong. But I think maligning him and the way in which this show is not really appropriate.
No. You see, I also think that then he should, perhaps get himself a little more educated on what Pakistan has been doing, the human rights abuses it carries out in Balochistan. I get KC Singh, Christine, let's get KC Singh on this. Let's get KC Singh to counter that view. I'm coming to you, Kawal Sibal. KC, your response to Christine Fair.
Yes, Arnab, I think, this is basically Pakistani propaganda which has been going around, which Mr. Hagel has lapped up. And the surprising thing is that he's not just an innocent Republican wandering around the Congress or the Senate. He's been on an defense advisory committee of the Obama government. He's been on an intelligence advisory committee. He's distanced himself from his Republican colleagues. And that's why there are 15 of them who have taken up arms against him. They don't want, his own party does not want him nominated. So therefore he's acted as a contrarian. He's been distancing himself from the Republicans. But distancing yourself doesn't mean you make such outrageous claims. And if he's done that, if he's done it innocently, Ray is trying to explain it, I think the explanation should come from the Defense Secretary designate. It should not come from other people. He needs to explain it because for India the context is very important. US is withdrawing. India is very sensitive about what is going to happen after the withdrawal. And you do not want a defense secretary having these kinds of undigested information coming from Pakistan, and he goes on presenting it. And he's stepping into the shoes of Gates, who has performed remarkably for the last 6-7 years because he's understood the complexities of the region. And this kind of a charge that India is supporting the Balochistanis there, it's an old charge. Firstly, Pakistan is saying we got tens of consulates in Afghanistan when we only have 4. And if we are training anybody, I've heard Americans say this in track 2 events, senior Americans, that they have never found any camp which Indians can run in the southern part of Afghanistan. In any case, wherever the American troops are not there, Pakistan's friends, the Taliban, are there. So there is no place for India to run a camp or to run any operations in the southern part of Afghanistan. So it's really surprising, this kind of argument. I think he's just taken it from some Pakistani source and he's just marketing it.